everybody. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower, and today I'm going to discuss a rather cryptic topic that gets a lot of speculation, and that is the topic of Theophilus, to whom the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts were written. So we're going to talk about who this could have been and how this really affects Christianity as a whole. But before I get started, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give me a big thumbs up. And be sure to check out the description of this video and all the prior videos for any counter missions and Noachide life resources you may need. So let's get started. Theophilus, to whom was Luke writing? An Exodus Project presentation. Okay, in the Coptic tradition, he was an Alexandrian Jew. So what can we understand from that? So first of all, Coptic Christianity, that was based in Alexandria, the northern part of Egypt, very Hellenized. It was a capital of Alexander, obviously, when he was on his conquest. Much like Philo, who was also a Hellenist Alexandrian Jew, Philo of Alexandria. So we see that the Coptic tradition, this Egyptian church tradition, holds that this Theophilus was an eminent Hellenist located in Alexandria, which was one of the primary Greek-speaking centers, as we've discussed before and many times about all these different cities that books in the New Testament are written to. Alexandria is no different, and this Hellenized Jew here is considered by the Coptics, at least in their tradition, to be who Theophilus is. So a New Testament scholar named John Wesley, he's quoted to say, a person, that Theophilus of course, is a person of eminent quality at Alexandria, which he understood to be the tradition of the quote-unquote ancients, meaning the early Coptics, the early Alexandrian Hellenist Christians. Also, many popes of the Coptic Church. So the Coptic Church is basically its own orthodoxy, severed from, Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. The Coptic Church is its own, and many of the popes or the bishops of what they call Abba, they call their pope's father. So many popes of the Coptic tradition take the name of Theophilus, and what this shows us is it's a clear title of eminence, which shows the regard to this original Theophilus and how, venerated and held up he is in this tradition. So, according to Coptics, just to review, they believe Luke and Acts was being written to this eminent Hellenized Jewish figure in Alexandria. Okay, a Roman official. So Luke referred to him as Kratistos, which in the Latin Vulgate will be rendered as OPTIME. This means most excellent. So in ancient times, in the late ancient world, the Roman Empire, a common way to address the Roman officials who were of some importance was OPTIME, most excellent, whether it be political or militaristic. And this actually carries over into, the Christian period of Rome. For example, if you check out, I believe the channel is Kings and Generals. They do a lot of content. It's a brilliant channel, so check it out. They have a lot of content on ancient wars, and one of the letters they were citing was actually a letter to one of the generals in a campaign, and he's addressed as OPTIME, or most excellent. So we see that it was a term of endearment, right? It was an honorary term showing you had some type of station, because of course generals in a militaristic society like Rome, they're way up on the ladder. So this was clearly someone of a status, someone of a great stature in their society, and we know that just from him being called OPTIME, and we'll get more to that. But further, it is important to note that Luke addresses him as OPTIME, most excellent, which is, as I had just mentioned, a title often used when referring to someone of honor or rank, such as, of course, a Roman official. Okay, so Paul, he also uses the same word, the same honorary usage for Roman governors. In Acts 23, I believe that should be 26. In Acts 23:26, Claudius Lysias, to his excellency, this word right here would be OPTIME. So Claudius Lysias to his OPTIME, the governor Felix, greetings. Also in Acts 24:2, when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, since through you we enjoy much peace, and since by your foresight, OPTIME, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation. Also 26:25, but Paul said, I am not out of my mind. OPTIME, most excellent Festus, but I am speaking true and rational words. So clearly we see that Paul was, he admits, we see it in Acts, and also from his own writings, that he was a Roman citizen. Clearly he would have been up to date on Roman etiquette. And he is using the Roman vernacular to address these Roman officials. So we understand whether or not it's true. I know this is church tradition. Luke was a companion of Paul, so clearly Luke himself would have had the same understanding. I mean, that doesn't hold true through everything, because we do see a lot of places where Luke and Paul do in fact agree theologically. But regardless, we do understand that Luke's writings were embellished from the earlier Pauline writings. But still, we could deduce that Luke himself, by the way he's addressing this letter and Acts, the way he's addressing his writings, he's speaking to some preeminent, whether it be Roman official or someone tied in, because we do in fact have the same exact usage from Paul when he addresses Roman officials. So now I'll get into OPTIME. So the optimates and the populares, so optimates and populares. So I understand that OPTIME and optimates are not the same word, but they do in fact share a root. So it's clearly denoting the elevated status that is connected to the word and its usage. So what are optimates? They are considered, it translates literally to the best ones. Demagogues, populists, aristocrats. Optimates and populares were the two principal patrician political groups during the later Roman Republic from about 133 to 27 BCE. So this does predate the New Testament, but we do see also the members of both groups belong to the wealthier classes. But we do understand that even though this might not be an exact parallel, that I'm not saying that because he addresses him as optime that he's an optimate. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have in their political system the same root word showing the venerated status. Clearly, if you were to address one of these people, you probably would say optime, right? So it just goes to show the veneration that goes along with the root word here. There's an umbilical connection between the social veneration that the denotation this word would carry with it. Okay, an honorary title. So Theophilus is Greek for friend of God. So in this tradition, the author's targeted audience, as well as with all other canonical gospels, were the learned, the academic class, but unnamed men and women of the era. So what does that tell us? So we have an overarching motif here. So the target audience would be learned in Greek, as most of the elite class in the Roman, Alexandrian, Hellenized cultures, Antioch, Ephesus, Corinthia, all these places you would be speaking to the elitist class here. Maybe not necessarily the highest most class, the aristocrats necessarily, but whether it be new money or elected officials. We can certainly understand from this tradition that these things were written only for the learned, not for the illiterate bottom class. So that opens up a bunch of doors regarding the origins of Christianity, is though it spread like wildfire through the bottom classes, because you now have a place in the world, there's better things to come. But we see from the cities that it's thriving in, whether it be Ephesus, Antioch, Alexandria, Rome as a whole, Rome was very good at adopting different gods, different religions. I mean, we understand in 200s BCE, the 2nd century BCE, when they conquered Greece, that they were more than willing to adopt the Greek pantheon into their own religious practice, because as a whole, Rome was actually very tolerant when it came to religious freedom. So what does that mean to us? Is that as long as you do the things that we want you to do, venerate the deities we need you to venerate, you can worship whomever else you please. And that ties in very similarly with, when Jesus says, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, etc., because, Rome was very tolerant of how you believed, as long as you, kept your head down and did what they wanted. Okay. Another tradition, which is a bit of a minority opinion, but they believe that he may have been Paul's lawyer. So we see a lot of legal rhetoric in the Gospel of Luke. For example, eyewitnesses, account, carefully investigated, know the certainty of things which you have been instructed, etc. So we can see that Luke is using this gospel to plead Paul's case, because we see at the end of Acts, Paul is still alive, but he is awaiting his trial. He's being held in Rome. And whether we can believe it or not, I don't believe really any of it's credible, but just going strictly off of what we have, it's possible that Theophilus was the lawyer of Paul, and Luke was trying to plead his case and give this Theophilus personality something to work off of as Paul awaited trial. But further, a lawyer would also be in the elite learned Roman caste, and of course he would have an exquisite knowledge of Greek. And further, Jesus and Pontius Pilate's trial parallel is, meant to be a direct comparative allegory with Paul's trial. The gospel is used to make this chosen man of God connection between Jesus and Paul to really prove their innocence. And once again, this adds into the allegorical theory of the Gospels, which is gaining a lot of backing, a lot of scholarship, that the Gospels themselves were written to be mythos. They were written to be read allegorically, but other factions didn't agree, and what happened was the literalists won. So, okay, another tradition is that he could have been a Jewish priest, and these are in fact two people we know by name of Theophilus ben Ananas, who was the high priest in the Second Temple in Jerusalem from 37 to 41 CE. This is according to Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews. He was a member of one of the wealthiest and most influential Jewish families in the Judean province during the 1st century. So if we know anything about history, this is a Sadducean family, in bed with Rome, appointed by the Herods, etc. So he was the son of Ananus. Ananus was appointed by the Roman legate Quirinius as the first high priest of the newly formed Roman province, Judea, in CE year 6. So just after the Romans had disposed of Archelaus, and what that means is, the Herodians were the puppet kings of Rome. They had just disposed of him. This then put Judea directly under Roman rule. So this high priest is appointed directly by Rome. Definitely a Sadducee, in bed with Rome, taking his orders directly from Rome, and it just goes to show the where his mind is at. He's certainly not on the side of Judah or Judaism by any means, but clearly buddy in partnership with the empire. And he was the brother-in-law of Caiaphas. So that even adds more credence to, Sadducean, right? We even see in John 18:24, then Ananus sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. So, contemporaries of when they claim Jesus lived. Adherents claim that Luke's gospel was targeted at Sadducee readers. I mean, that's pretty clear if you understand that the Sadducees were clearly on the side of Rome, and Luke has a very pro-Roman voice. So there's a very good possibility that the Sadducean readers were the target audience. And this Theophilus would be no different, being an appointed high priest in the temple under the Sadducee, I guess you could say, reign, or the Sadducee period. Luke starts off his gospel by mentioning Zacharias, the righteous priest. Clearly, he would, if we're understanding that this is the pro-Sadducee voice, we can understand that Zacharias is being considered righteous as a Sadducee. And then it goes right into, Mary as Anita, which means her impurity after she gives birth. The Pidyon Haben, which is the reclaiming of the firstborn for Jesus. These are things that are mentioned in the beginning of the gospel. The pilgrimage to Jerusalem at Passover every year. That's explicitly mentioned right there in the beginning. It's showing an adherence of this family to the written Torah alone, as the Sadducees rejected the oral Torah. So it's building up right at the outset this pro-Sadducee, pro-written Torah only voice. So the Sadducees would be captivated when they read it, and it pulls them into, believe what's being purported here. Also, it omits Caiaphas at Jesus' trial. The other Gospels don't, but Luke certainly does. It omits Caiaphas at Jesus' trial to maintain this pro-Sadducee voice. Because if it is being directed at this Theophilus character who was, in a way, related to Caiaphas, you don't want to be putting down the family members. So, and then Mattathias ben Theophilus. This is actually his son. So he served from 65 to 66. Note that Luke refers to the high priest Joseph ben Caiaphas simply as Caiaphas. Thus, as reasoning goes, Luke used this pattern also when addressing Theophilus. So, as I mentioned, he is the son of Theophilus ben Ananus. He was actually the high priest at the start of the Jewish Revolution, and he was overthrown by the revolutionary forces. So that's, we're starting to see the uprising against Rome. It's heating up, and this member of the Roman appointed high priesthood, he was ousted by the revolutionaries. But he himself was appointed by Herod Agrippa II, another Herod, Roman puppet king, in the 17th year of Agrippa's reign, corresponding with the 12th year of Nero's reign, or 65-66 CE. Agrippa tried desperately to avert a war with Rome. So what does that tell us? You're not going to appoint someone to the high priesthood in charge of the state religion if they're against Rome. You're on the side of Rome. You're a puppet king of the empire. You're against the war. You're not going to make one of the most influential religious figures someone who isn't on the side of Rome. So that just goes to show, if this is being written to him, where the voice would be. It would certainly be very pro-Roman, very pro-Sadducee. And further, Agrippa II fled Jerusalem in 66, fearing the Jewish uprising, and supported the Roman side of the war. So we are seeing explicitly from all these points that, Agrippa himself and his subsidiaries who he'd be appointing to the religious authority would certainly be siding with Rome and not otherwise, because his whole point is to keep the uprising down. So, and finally, Theophilus of Antioch. So Theophilus was a patriarch of Antioch from year 169 CE until 182 CE. So I understand this is after the Christian period, but there is a very up and coming. There's actually a lot of scholarship on this, and it's a theory it's getting a lot of steam, that Luke and Acts, possibly some of the other gospels, even some of the epistles, etc., were written in the 2nd century. And there's a lot of textual analysis and textual criticism that backs it up. So I'm going to include this as a possibility of one of the potential Theophiluses who Luke could have been writing to. So his writings, the only remaining being his apology to Autolycus, indicate that he was born a pagan, not far from the Tigris and Euphrates, and was led to embrace Christianity by studying the Holy Scriptures, especially the prophetical books. So here we go again. Just like Justin Martyr in the other show I had recently done, born a pagan, converts and tries to use those own pagan arguments against paganism. So Theophilus' apology is most notable for being the earliest extant Christian work to use the word Trinity. This is important. Theophilus himself puts it as God, his word, the Logos, and his wisdom, Sophia, perhaps following the early Christian practice of identifying the Holy Spirit as the wisdom of God. So that would be pulled from Proverbs, because we know in Proverbs that Solomon refers to the Torah as wisdom throughout the entire book. But this Trinity here, the wisdom of God and his word, the Logos, which would be Jesus, right? But where does that come from? So let's go to the next point, Philo. Philo's proto-Gnostic Logos literature stems from Alexandria and is explicit in the gospel accounts, John's prologue most specifically. It is basically a verbatim plagiarism of Philo's own Logos literature. So clearly, Theophilus is building his Trinity theology from Philo's proto-Gnostic Logos ideologies. And he's using this blend of Gnosticism, Greek philosophy, and his understanding of the Hebrew scriptures to formulate this I guess you could say proto-Trinity. But if this Theophilus is to be believed, this would indeed align with the 2nd century dating of Luke and Acts. But we're seeing many influences. At this point in time, there's no set orthodoxy. People are reading, interpreting, and following their own traditions with different gospels and many different ideologies. There was no singular mind in Christianity at the time. It was even more variegated than it is now. So this just stands to prove the impact that Philo's philosophy and his proto-Gnosticism had to impact these early church fathers. And yeah, so these are the possible personalities who this Theophilus may have been. But to wrap it all up, every single person shares one major thing in common, is that they are all eminent figures, Hellenized figures, on the side of Rome, with a excellent mind in Greek, a worldview that's Hellenized, a very much pro-Roman voice, all of them very much on the side of Rome in the major issues that were going on at the time. And even the later option, who it may have been, this Theophilus of Antioch, he himself was, in his own writings, in his own apologies, quoting philosophers and their ideologies straight out of Alexandria. So, yeah, guys, I hope this clears some stuff up, and I hope it helps. As I said before, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, check out the description, and we'll see you next time, everyone.